Hey everyone, I'm Kurt. Welcome to the channel. Today I've got a pre-release of Beyond ATC's VFR update. You may know that BATC released their own video just the other day to show off the features of the new version, but what it didn't get into is showing you the North American phraseology. I'll be presenting that so that US and Canadian pilots can have a listen to what it feels like to work with this new edition. And you're going to see that it's really nice and it's very comfortable to fly with. However, keep in mind this is a work in progress. This is not the final version of the VFR update. I don't even know if this is the one that's going to release to the experimental build. There's still a few rough spots, so just keep that in mind. They're actively developing on this and it changes daily right now. I'll leave it to their video to cover all the details of how to set up VFR, and today we're mostly just going to take a quick peek at how it works in the North American flow. So with all that out of the way, I'll turn it over to myself in the airplane, and I hope you learned something from this and enjoy it. And I'll catch you at the end. One thing I did want to call out that I think is extremely cool that they added to this version is that you're no longer tied to SimBrief. SimBrief is great for IFR stuff, but I've never understood trying to use it in any other context. So I love that they've added the ability to just take your flight simulator flight plan and import it directly into Beyond ATC. So today I've set up just Camarillo, California to Van Nuys. The two airports are, 25 miles away from each other. So we're going to do a couple circuits at Camarillo, and that'll show you how it works for pattern work. And then we'll leave Camarillo's airspace, head on over to Van Nuys, and come into their airspace as an arriving aircraft, and you'll see how it functions with that. This version doesn't support flight following or untowered airports, really. I mean, you can do all your calls at an untowered airport and it's not going to care, but it doesn't generate traffic for them, and you won't hear other aircraft in the pattern at an untowered airport. So just be aware that to really get the most out of this, it's, in this iteration at least, primarily for flying at towered airports and doing, mostly pattern work. But like I said, if you're just doing a short cross country where you didn't want flight following or something, it actually does that pretty well. So let's click fly and we'll get on with it. All right, let's go ahead and get our ATIS and we'll get started.
Enter 8, landing and departing runway 26. Advise on initial contact, you have information, Victor.
Sure.
Camarillo Airport information, Victor. 1820 Zulu, wind variable. Visibility 10, sky condition clear, temperature 19er, dew point 14, altimeter 29er98, landing and departing runway 26. Advise on initial contact, you have information, Victor.
So in the case of some of the smaller airports, the ground frequency doesn't work properly and it'll transfer you over to tower to get your taxi clearance. Camarillo is one of those airports, so we'll just call tower up and do it that way. Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is type 172 on the ramp at Waypoints Cafe, ready to taxi with Victor.
November 734 Delta Bravo, Camarillo Tower, say intentions.
Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo will be remaining in the pattern.
November 734 Delta Bravo, runway 26 taxi via Bravo.
Runway 26 via Bravo for 4 Delta Bravo. All right.
November 356 November Delta. Rep 57, request pushback.
November 356 November Delta, Camarillo Tower, pushback approved. Face northwest.
Pushback approved, face northwest. November 356 November Delta.
Camarillo Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is ready to go at 26.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, wind variable, runway 26, cleared for takeoff. Make left traffic, report midfield downwind.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 26 for Delta Bravo. Strobes are on. I don't have any head tracker going today, so kind of trying to make do with my regular views.
November 356 November Delta. Taxi for departure.
November 356 November Delta, runway 26 taxi via Bravo.
Runway 26 taxi via Bravo. November 356 November Delta.
And that's about 1,000 feet.
November 356 November Delta. Ready for departure. Runway 26.
November 356 November Delta, Camarillo Tower, wind variable, fly runway heading, runway 26, cleared for takeoff.
Fly runway heading. Runway 26. Cleared for takeoff. November 356 November Delta.
Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is downwind abeam.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, runway 26, wind variable, cleared touch and go.
There, touch and go, Cessna 4 Delta Bravo. Alright, slow her on down. One notch of flaps, trimming for 70. We'll see how much traffic we get here at Camarillo. It sometimes simulates a little quieter than it really is. Since when English T did his video, he used a fairly busy airport. If you want to see how it handles traffic, you could easily see that there. And we'll see if we get anybody on the approach here. It sounded like there were a couple departures going
November
on.
356 November Delta. Contact Los Angeles Center 135.5.
Second notch of flaps in there.
Los Angeles, Center 135.5, November 356 November Delta.
Started my turn a bit early. Slow, put the nose down just a bit. We're given a touch and go clearance already, so everything's good there. Slightly high. Which I don't worry too much about VFR. High is good. Camarillo is a funny airport. They have this long, unusable blast pad. It used to be an Air Force base 40 years ago, and they've been ever shortening the runway. Flaps up. You can change your intent when you do your midfield call-in. Otherwise, it'll assume that you're going to continue doing the same pattern work you started with. So if you're just doing touch and goes and you just call it and tell it your midfield, then it'll just assume that you're going for another touch and go. If you want, you can tell it you're doing a full stop, you can tell it you're doing a low pass, or you could exit the pattern. Our Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is downwind. We'd like a stop and go this time.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo. Wind variable. Runway 26. Cleared stop and go.
Cleared stop and go. 734 Delta Bravo. Now, depending on traffic, sometimes they'll call your base, sometimes they'll have your report final. Really just depends on what's going on, so it's nice because it feels very much like the real thing. And I think that kind of traffic sequencing is going to continue to improve. In the BATC video, English T talked a bit about that, and I'm really looking forward to see what they can do with that. So after this one, we'll see if we can get a departure out on the downwind, go on over to Van Nuys. That'll show you how we can leave and enter airspaces, and we'll wrap it up from there. Runway is easily made at this point, so reducing the throttle, nose down just a bit. 65 is about as slow as you want. Ugh, it's not working. Adding some throttle. Alright. Not pretty, but whatever. So we told her we were going to stop. Flaps up. Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is downwind. We'd like departure to the east.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, wind variable, runway 26. Cleared, stop, and go.
Oops, let's try that again. Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo would like to depart the pattern to the east. I had done that one before, but perhaps not. The other option you have here, let's look at the menu here and see what might work better. Don't need to go around. Frequency change we can do, and that's probably actually the way we'll handle it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that once we get further from the airport. That seems like an area for improvement there. Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is departing the pattern to the east with like frequency change.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, frequency change approved. Good day.
Delta Bravo, frequency change approved. Good day. All right. Now, officially, the VFR add-on doesn't support VFR call-in points. However, it's been my experience that for the most part, since Beyond ATC doesn't really care too much where you are, it knows. You can usually get away with just using them anyways, and it'll just play along with you. So we'll try that when we get up here. First, we need to get our Van Nuys ATIS, which, of course, you could dial in directly, or you'll have it on your list of comms under the headset icon here. You probably already know that if you've been using Beyond ATC. So we'll just double-click that, and that'll dial it in.
Altimeter 29997, landing and departing runway 16 right. Advise on initial contact, you have information, Kilo. Van Nuys Airport information, Kilo, 1820 Zulu, wind 140 at 6. Visibility 10, ceiling 1700, broken, 2300 overcast, temperature 18.
Switch to tower now, since we're not talking to anybody anyway.
Thank you, enable. November 42982.
Van Nuys Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is type 172 at Warner Center, 2,000 feet. VFR inbound landing with Kilo.
Van Nuys Tower, November 734 Delta Bravo. We don't see you at the assigned departure runway yet.
Departure runway? Where did you get that idea, my dear? Let's see, what...
Van Nuys Tower, November 32291. ILS Zulu, runway 16 right.
So it didn't like something about my inbound report. We'll try that again.
November 32291, Van Nuys Tower, wind 140 at 6, runway 16 right, cleared to land.
Runway 16 right, cleared to land. November 32291. 191.
Van Nuys Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo. Is at Warner Center, 2,000 feet, inbound, landing with Kilo.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, Van Nuys Tower, enter left downwind runway 16 right, report midfield downwind, altimeter 2997.
We'll enter left downwind for 16 right, 4 Delta Bravo. Van Nuys Tower, Cessna 734 Delta Bravo is midfield downwind, 16 right.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, runway 16 right, wind 170 at Niner, clear to land.
Cleared to land, runway 16 right, Cessna 4 Delta Bravo.
Van Nuys Tower, November 886 Charlie Mike, ILS runway 16 right.
November 886 Charlie Mike, Van Nuys Tower, continue.
Roger, November 886 Charlie Mike. Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, exit next available taxiway.
For Delta Bravo, we'll exit next available.
Cessna 4 Delta Bravo, contact ground 121.7, take care.
Over to 121.7, good day. So there you go. I think it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this evolves. I want to thank all of you for stopping by. I hope we'll see you back here again sometime, and until next time, take care.